Okay, I just watched the latest Mission Impossible film starring Tom Cruise, and I've gotten into a little bit of his role in all of this, at least the way they are using his characters as a part of this subconscious sorcery. And this latest film is a continuation of that. But to get a better idea of what I mean, I want to focus on 2001: A Space Odyssey real quick before going into the actual Mission Impossible scenes. This is the ending, and I've only seen this movie one time, so I didn't even remember this happened. But at the end here, they show Bowman reach up to touch the monolith, and you, the viewer, your eyes actually go into it at this point. And the first thing that they show you after you go through the monolith is the moon. And I'll play that for you just in case you haven't seen it. So hopefully you can understand what I mean there in terms of this being a massive ritual that this film was an integral part of. Understanding Donald Trump as the Moonchild, the twin of 9/11, and this film 2001: A Space Odyssey. They show you Dave Bowman reaching up to touch the monolith, which of course is the screen, whichever version you want to view it as. I'm looking at a screen right now that is the same thing, right? It's the portal into another dimension, a portal into virtual reality, a space odyssey. In other words, your dimension is changing. You are reaching up to touch the screen. I mean, some of you are listening to this on the thing that I'm discussing here, right? You're listening to it on the phone. That is a version of this. You're touching it right now, holding it in your hand. And that is the ritual that all of this propaganda is referring to. Remember, the beginning of the film starts with an alignment of the screen with the sun and the moon, alluding to this idea of the eclipse. And this is relating to the moon as it eclipses the sun, or in this case, the subconscious sorcery is the moon child eclipsing reality itself, right? The Moonchild is eclipsing the United States of America through those two presidential terms, which is the two towers being destroyed on September 11, 2001. It's the beginning of the Space Odyssey. That's why they put that Millennium Hilton Hotel shaped as a monolith right next to where the towers would be destroyed. Symbolically, they're showing you this is what it is. Through this destruction, through this space odyssey, you, your eyes, your consciousness itself will merge with technology. And the great American eclipse via the Moonchild is tied into it in this way, right? Those two terms coinciding with the two paths of what they refer to as the great American eclipse. For those of you who don't know, this was the path in 2017, coinciding with Donald Trump's first presidential term, and then this was the path in 2024, coinciding with the second presidential term. Or at least at the time, he was on the campaign trail leading up to his election later that year. And as I've noted many times before, the 2024 path crossed into America in Eagle Pass, Texas. And Donald Trump gave a speech in Eagle Pass on a leap day, 2024 being a leap year, because it was all about this quantum leap. That's why they called it Operation Warp Speed. That's why one of the first things he did when he got into office the second time in 2025 was announce Project Stargate, right? It's all about this idea of sending your mind through a portal into another dimension. 2001: A Space Odyssey. The journey, the leap, takes place into the screen. And they show you that literally in 2001: A Space Odyssey. He reaches up to touch the screen and has this evolution, spontaneously turns into the quote-unquote star child. And the first thing they show you after going through the screen is the moon with this new reality. Because that film is a part of this larger ritual involving Donald Trump and everything we see on the news. And it's wild because this path in 2023 transpired in October. I believe it was the 14th of October. Yeah, October 14th, 2023, which was just a couple days after the Israel-Palestine thing kicked off. So you have this path coinciding with that, and then you have these two paths coinciding with Donald Trump, the twin of 9/11. The personification of that event in reality itself, right? More so than just the one event on that day in September in 2001. He embodies that event. He's the eclipse of America. And this is all functioning on so many different levels. So at the same time, he's the eclipse of the mind as well, symbolically. Our mind is being eclipsed into virtual reality. The eyes are merging with the screen itself. It's a very subtle thing right now. People don't quite comprehend what's going on other than in subtle ways, right? People feel like time isn't what it used to be. Well, yeah, when you take the leap into virtual reality, the fabric of your existence is changing in those moments. Your perception of time shifts because time is an element of the fabric of reality itself. And so when you are altering the fabric of your reality, the time dilates. And the more and more people are immersed in the technology, the more they feel like things are speeding up. Because the minutes, seconds, hours, that artificial measurement of time that you experience in regular life, when you're not attached to technology, don't fit with the amount of information your mind is forced to process when you are bombarded with it via the screen or whatever you're observing it through. The mind wasn't designed to process all of that information. And by design then, time is altered when you are exposed to information in a way that you were not able to process it originally. It shifts your perception. And it feels like time is speeding up. You sit down to get on the internet and just check some things out, and you wake up 6 hours later like, what happened? I gotta go to bed. Oh, what was I doing? I got lost there. And in that way, it's this massive shift in collective perception. It's a space odyssey and a gigantic ritual along these lines that has been shown to us. We just didn't have the eyes to see it at the time. But obviously, the entities that are orchestrating this thing know about these cycles. They know the cosmic scale very intimately. So they can coordinate around it and thread the news events and everything we see with this subconscious propaganda. Especially movies. I mean, that's the main source of doing this. And collectively, that subtly alters our perception without us knowing it. We collectively agree to the changes that are taking place in a very subconscious, liminal way. And the fact that this film was released in 1968, knowing that it was this fuse that would be lit 33 years later in 2001, just shows you how patient they are in terms of planning all of this stuff. Shows you how patient they are and how much they know about what's coming in the future ahead of time, right? It's incredible, kind of. If there wasn't so much, death and destruction surrounding it, the ability to foresee and plan in this way is, well, it's just like that German composer stated about it after the fact, right? This unimaginable work of art that he referred to it as. Stockhausen was his name, I believe, if I'm remembering that correctly. I mean, yeah, that's how you would perceive it if you were on the other side of it. Look what we did. Now, from the perspective of the people who were killed on that day or who were later killed from being exposed to all the chemicals, it's not really a work of art, now is it? And that's the disconnect. Because we're dealing with ritual sacrifices here that somehow also power this thing where the life force is sacrificed in these events, and that power is drawn into this thing that they are building through our minds and our just ability to create collectively. It was always designed that Donald Trump would co-opt this conspiracy information. He would become the representative of it in the same way that Stanley Kubrick is a representative of it now. That's the slow fuse I'm referring to here. As soon as 2001 happened and people could go, wait a second, there's a monolith at quote-unquote ground zero in New York, right next to those twin towers that fell. What's going on here? And then people start going into Kubrick in more detail, looking at all the other films, and then they have his death related to it as well, where they have a conspiracy surrounding that people then latch onto. Oh, he was trying to expose the truth and was killed for it. I did a whole video on that if you want to dive into that in more detail. But clearly, this film was made knowing what was coming. It was made knowing that this merger with the technology was designed into our future. And symbolically, it encapsulated the whole thing that later played out. And that's why Donald Trump has that Trump World Tower in the UN Plaza that is a monolith as well, because he's the twin of this event, you see? Or at least they are using him as the twin of it symbolically. But I never noticed before, or it didn't register at the time I originally watched this movie like 15 years ago, that when he touches the screen, which is you, it shows you going into it, and the first thing you see is the moon as the score of the film hits again. In the way it did originally, where the monolith is there with the eclipse imagery. And that's the whole ritual, right? It's these screens in the context of the Great American Eclipse, which is functioning on so many different layers. And going back to this, remember that there was the flood in Texas on the morning of July 4th, and that flood took place right here. Look at this. Right where these two cross, that flood on the morning of July 4th, Independence Day in the United States of America. Again, symbolically, there's this sacrifice of people who die in this event on the morning of July 4th that just so happens to be directly related to these three eclipses. As those eclipses then are symbolically related to the intentional controlled demolition of the United States of America, and how that relates to what's going on in the Middle East with the relationship between the United States and Israel, and how that whole thing is playing into the destruction of the country. But getting back to Tom Cruise and the new Mission Impossible film, I go into this in detail in the video I have up on the screen here about Vanilla Sky, Eyes Wide Shut, and Arrival, and virtual reality. But remember from that video that David Ames, the character Tom Cruise plays in Vanilla Sky, is said to have been born on 9/22/1968. That's his first life cycle, which ends in December of 2001, right? So there's this idea that Tom Cruise's character enters the lucid dream. He enters technology. He goes through that portal in 2001, born in 1968. And I'll go over all of that in a little more detail just so somebody new knows what I'm talking about. But I did a whole video on this if you want to really get into it. The whole 1968 thing. And why that's important. Well, first of all, 2001: A Space Odyssey was released in April of 1968. But then also, on the day, September 22nd, 1968, there is a total solar eclipse. So David Ames, remember Ames, Bowman, it has this association between that character and Bowman from 2001: A Space Odyssey. David Ames is born September 22nd, 1968. And obviously Bowman goes on his Space Odyssey in the film 2001, released in the same year, 1968. And then you have September 11th, 2001, obviously. So there's a total solar eclipse on the day Tom Cruise's character is born in that film. And 11 days prior to that total solar eclipse, on September 11th, 1968, there's a plane crash, Air France Flight 1611. So you have the 911 directly in the flight number relating to a plane that crashes on September 11th. Hopefully you can see how that is a mini ritual that took place. However, it was coordinated where this plane crash right in the same window as this total solar eclipse is the 9/11 ritual in the microcosm. Planes crashing into those towers on September 11, 2001 in the context of the Great American Eclipse, in the context of this idea of the moon eclipsing the sun. And you going through the Stargate via that event, right? The idea of your mind being sent to the land of Oz. A new altar flipping forward that had been slowly and methodically built over time through exposure to just media in general over many decades. Collectively, that seeps into our mind and it's passed down generationally, it's built up, and then eventually that fuse is lit and it starts to merge with actual reality itself as we touch the screen more and more, as it becomes more infused into our daily lives. And then obviously there's a couple other things that transpired in 1968 that everyone's familiar with. There's the release date of 2001: A Space Odyssey, and then a day later, there's the MLK assassination, and then RFK is assassinated in June, a couple days before Rosemary's Baby is released. So you have this idea of Oz, JFK, Dealey Plaza, and assassination being tied in to this ritual. Now, you could view that in terms of a metaphor, like the mind is being assassinated. It's being killed, for lack of a better term. But then now we have this Charlie Kirk assassination, and I'm just wondering if everything I was seeing about assassination was relating to that event and not necessarily Donald Trump being assassinated. I don't know. We'll just have to see how it plays out. But when I was getting into all of this at the time, I assumed that was all relating to a possible assassination of Donald Trump coming. But now I'm wondering, well, is it Charlie Kirk actually that this whole thing was pointing towards? The turning point, right? The turning point where the towers have been struck by the two planes, which is Donald Trump's two terms. They're metaphorically on fire, billowing smoke, and the demolition is coming. And his assassination is the turning point, metaphorically speaking. And that's what was being alluded to through all of this assassination association. All the Oz JFK stuff. Dealey Plaza in the shape of a 77. Dealey Plaza built into the design of the Twin Towers. Atari releases its console on September 11th, 1977, right? 77 Oz, the whole idea of virtual reality. And Atari, and the meaning in Japanese of that word, and hitting the target, and just the whole thing, right, is potentially alluding to that just as much as it was alluding to Donald Trump. I don't know. We'll just have to see. And then construction started on One World Trade Center in 1968 as well. And One World Trade Center was the first tower struck on September 11, 2001. And it was the last one to fall. So the whole ritual involved World Trade Center 1 being hit and then falling. And it lasted 102 minutes. And of course, 102 minutes is the length of The Wizard of Oz, 1 hour and 42 minutes. Oh yeah, and that reminds me, just seeing this on the screen here, Wicked, and then that ties in that whole thing that went on with JFK's assassination anniversary in November, and the release of Wicked and Kendrick Lamar's album, and how that whole thing related to the Super Bowl ritual, and how they showed you the portal, the Stargate at the beginning of that ritual, and the Gemini Man, and all that Megalopolis, Caesar stuff, and the tick-tock on the roof, the clock. I'll get sidetracked if I start talking about that. But I did a video on that as well. You can go back and check that out. It's all one cohesive thing. It's kind of like how they depict fractals. If you go into one section of it, you can see the whole thing, but you can also lose sight of the fact that it's a larger image if you're focused or get sidetracked on just one aspect of it. So I always try to zoom back out to the larger image, but I suppose as you continue to zoom out, you see the same thing you do as you continue to zoom in. But anyway, it's kind of like a fractal. So where was I? The Vanilla Sky thing, Eyes Wide Shut, Arrival, Tom Cruise, 1968 to 2001. This character is embodying 9/11. And the plot of the film is this character dying on December 26, 2001, right at the end of 2001, and going into a virtual reality, a lucid dream afterlife. And symbolically, that's what happened to us collectively after September 11, 2001. Our minds were disconnected from the old reality, and it began the process of sending us into a new dimension. And Donald Trump, as the twin of that event, is just continuing that ritual. He was always planned to do that. I mean, they scripted him from his birth to do that, which is why he was born, or at least they tell us he was born, under a total blood moon lunar eclipse in 1946. And then they further show you through the writings of Crowley this idea of the moon child being created to create this new aeon, right? And that's essentially what they're referring to. But in Mission Impossible, the film, they really drive this home where they dress Tom Cruise's character up like Bowman and Poole from 2001: A Space Odyssey, and they send him on his own Odyssey, but it's underwater. He goes down into the depths of the sea on this journey, and he ends up in a submarine. And the way they have the plot set up, the submarine starts to roll while he's in there, so it gives you the illusion that he's in a spaceship that's turning in no gravity, like they show you in some of the scenes from 2001: A Space Odyssey. So he's spinning in this submarine, and it has the illusion of him being in space, and he's in the suit in a very similar way to how they depict Bowman in 2001: A Space Odyssey. Hopefully you can see what I mean here, where he's in this all black suit. And it's interesting that it's all black because it's the color of the monolith, right? It's like he's embodying the monolith as he goes on this Odyssey. And even in this scene, the helmet he has on really looks like he's inside of a television screen or a screen of some kind, right? It looks like his face is in the screen. It's like it's being trapped in there. And that's the whole idea. The mind merging with the screen, the eyes fusing with it. That's what they show you in Arrival. And what happens in Arrival? It's all about this intelligence from the future showing itself to human beings in a way where time or the character's perception of it is altered. And that's what happens when you are sucked into virtual reality in this way. And thinking about this whole time thing a little more deeply, I think that might be why the time travel angle through Back to the Future and Donnie Darko and just all the other films that are associated with Donald Trump and this propaganda in general focus on that theme because that's what the internet allows. It's instantaneous time travel. You can put information together in a way that simply was not possible before the internet existed. An idea comes to your mind. I wonder what that was all about. You go dive back through time, acquiring all of this information about what was going on. You're getting images and stories and just all of this stuff that you otherwise would have had to work really hard to acquire before it was all just provided for you in this medium. And likewise, putting information together in this way allows you to essentially predict the future. It allows you to travel into the future. With your mind anyway, right? You can imagine potential futures based on this information that you're able to acquire that otherwise was impossible to put together before it was easily accessible. Similarly, there's all the parallel reality sci-fi stuff that's associated with this as well. The Stargate stuff, entering into a new dimension, all the things that I've been talking about in this video, but it's functioning on that layer as well, right? Where it's this idea of the parallel reality that's created when you enter into a device that's connected to the internet. It splits off from the main timeline that your mind is otherwise plugged into naturally. And you can go in any direction you choose. So yes, the propaganda is controlling our minds and steering us in this direction, but they're also showing you something there. Like, yeah, you are becoming a time traveler in a way that has theoretically never been possible before. If we're ignoring stories about ancient civilizations that were potentially technologically advanced and destroyed themselves. Let's say none of that happened. Well, if that's the case, this is the first time anything like this has ever been possible in this place. So it's a literal new reality in that way. And that is the ritual that is encoded into films like 2001: A Space Odyssey and then placed into actual physical reality via ritual events like 9/11. That event pushed your mind into a new reality. It started that process. And everyone says this who was alive at the time. Nothing was the same after that event. And people say it now about COVID, which was just a continuation of the 9/11 ritual, right? Things haven't been the same since COVID. Each event like this alters the mind in a similar way. It's related, and it pushes us through the Stargate further and further. It's like a black hole that you get closer and closer to. Eventually, you reach the escape velocity point where you cannot get out of its pull. And that's what it is. The black screen is the black hole, and that's what your eye is, right? Your eye is a black hole. So it's the two merging together in this singularity is how they refer to it. But they talk about that in terms of AI becoming aware. Well, how do you think AI becomes aware? It merges with human consciousness. The only thing that is capable of being aware. That's all AI is right now. It's language learning models. It's learning from us. It can't think on its own. It's algorithms that put together all of human history and all of human interactions on the internet. And then the algorithms are able to spit that back out. Anyways, getting sidetracked again. Moving on. So they're giving you this idea of, his head being stuck in this screen. He's going on an odyssey in the same way that Bowman goes on it because, in terms of the plot, what's he going down to get out of the submarine? He's going to get the source code for the AI that is trying to take over the world. So it's the same thing, Bowman has this interaction with Hal, and it's driving him to touch the screen eventually, right? That it sends him on that journey as he leaves. And Tom Cruise's character is doing the exact same thing. And this is why he's in Vanilla Sky And that film ends with him opening his eye. The last scene is Tom Cruise's eye opening. Because it was a companion film to Eyes Wide Shut. And what did they show us in Eyes Wide Shut? Well, they showed us the futility of becoming aware of this stuff. Subconsciously, that's what they were driving into your mind when you view it, right? It's, oh, he becomes aware of a conspiracy that's going on. He becomes aware of this whole other aspect of society that before he had no idea was happening. And then the end of the film is him realizing that it's totally pointless to try and find out anything about it, right? And that's what you are supposed to take in. Your eyes are wide shut. Sure, as a part of this fake conspiracy that we're going to put out there, you're going to become aware of things you weren't aware of. But it's pointless in the grand scheme of things because we're never going to give you anything that's really true. It's this fake conspiracy movement that we're just using to censor you eventually, right? But we're just allowing this stuff out there temporarily. We'll have our own fake controlled opposition version of it. We'll point the finger at ourselves. And through that process, we'll get all truth that was out there to get you hooked, censored. Eventually, you won't be able to talk about any of this. We'll debunk all of it, and it won't even be a thing. It's futile, right? And that's what they show you. And then he wakes up as a part of this 9/11 ritual in a lucid dream in virtual reality. And then, you know, they show you different aspects of this through other characters that he's played. Like in Oblivion, where the moon is destroyed and AI has taken over the Earth, and he's the clone human that enforces the whole thing. And eventually he, you know, taps into a human part of him in one of the clones and destroys the AI. But that's the happy ending they give you. It's the subconscious stuff that is important. It's Tom Cruise being associated with AI taking over, and they show you that very overtly in a way that it just bleeds into your subconscious mind. Via osmosis, you just start to accept that AI is coming in this way, right? That the fusion is coming. And so they do the same thing in the Mission Impossible film where they eventually prevail, but that's not what it's about. It's about associating these things together in a way you don't comprehend it in the moment. So anyway, Tom Cruise's character eventually acquires the source code. He goes through this Odyssey in this spinning submarine, and he recovers it, and this is what it looks like. It's a monolith. The AI source code is a monolith. And he makes contact with the monolith after he goes on his Odyssey. I thought I had a picture of that up. I guess I don't. But in any event, they show you him with this special key. He opens it and he touches the source code of the AI. He touches the monolith. And then directly after he touches the monolith, they show this scene of him trying to get back to the surface. And it's like he's the Star Child. He's in this pose where he's like that Star Child that Bowman turns into, and he dies momentarily, right? They have to revive him. So he's born again into something else. So maybe I just made all that up, but it seems really obvious that they encoded 2001: A Space Odyssey into this Mission Impossible film because of what Tom Cruise is intentionally associated with. And then later, when he's trying to get the monolith, they show him in a plane chase. Okay, think about what's going on here, all right? Two planes. He's in a plane trying to get the monolith that this character has, okay? I mean, there's the whole 9/11 ritual right there, okay? There's 9/22/1968, 2001: A Space Odyssey, the controlled demolition of those two towers by planes flying into them, the 9/11/68 plane crash, 2001: A Space Odyssey released in 1968, Tom Cruise in Eyes Wide Shut, directed by Stanley Kubrick, in Vanilla Sky, and then now this Mission Impossible film that's encoding it, because you have the plane aspect, and then also you have the fact that the planes are red and yellow, right? And you have Bowman in the red suit here, and then the other character Poole is in the yellow suit, if I can find it here. There's Frank Poole in the yellow suit, right? So do you understand what's going on there? You have the two guys that are in the ship with Hal that are the focus of 2001: A Space Odyssey in the red and yellow suits. And then you have Tom Cruise on the red plane as Bowman, right? He's David Ames. Okay. He's Bowman. He's turning into the Star Child, chasing the monolith that this guy is holding, the AI source code. He's going to touch it. He's going to reach in. And as he goes through, as he merges with the screen, it's the moon, because the moon is driving this ritual in the terms of how they've programmed it. The Great American Eclipse, and just in general, how they orchestrate things astrologically along these lines. Oh, I did have the picture up. This is him touching the monolith originally. And this is the room that it's in. And it just really reminded me of the sphere. That whole idea I got into in the one video about the sphere representing consciousness in these films. It's this spinning, rotating, spherical room that the AI source code is in, which symbolically is like the AI merging with consciousness itself. And he touches the source code after going on this odyssey, and then he's reborn after, drowning temporarily as he's trying to reach the surface. This is why Tom Cruise was featured in the Olympic closing ceremony, where he took the flag symbolically from Paris to LA. He was the bridge, in other words, which relates back to the whole Golden Gate Bridge, San Francisco, Francis AI thing, right? It's the bridge to the fusion, the singularity, as it were. And then the Golden Gate Bridge ties right into Donald Trump again, and how it's symbolic of the Golden Gate in Jerusalem and the rise of the Messiah figure in certain traditions, and how metaphorically that gate is being opened through this process. That's the more spiritual angle to all of this. At the same time that this technological fusion is taking place, it's this spiritual deception simultaneously going on. I mean, they're one and the same, right? You can't have one without the other, because you're losing touch with that which created you through this process of merging with the technology. Your mind is sent into a whole new dimension, and your perception then begins to change into something new entirely. Something that won't be recognizable in 100 years if things continue as they are going right now. And just coincidentally, as I was putting this video together, I just saw a quote from Clint Eastwood where he says, in 100 years, they're going to look back. That's the career, Tom Cruise's career. So sure, he's saying that in terms of look at what this guy did. It's going to be so impressive in hindsight. People don't appreciate it as it's going on right now. That's the innocent subtext of the quote. But more broadly, in terms of what I just went into, that's the career. You see, because they have infused him with this 2001: A Space Odyssey ritual. And symbolically, he is playing that out and controlling our minds when you watch the films. I mean, that's what he's doing. Whether he's aware of it or not. Someone on his level, he knows, okay? With how much money he's put into Scientology and where that comes from, he knows, okay? I'll allow for some debate. I mean, as if I'm the arbiter of these things, but you know what I mean? I would entertain debate about people that are, D-list actors. Do they know what's going on? Probably not. Maybe some of them do, who knows? But, yeah, that's the career. I mean, they have infused him with this thing, and it's always possible that you can see things that aren't really there, and maybe I'm making some things up, but when it comes to this Great American Eclipse stuff and 2001: A Space Odyssey, and, the obvious stuff like the red and yellow plane and the suits, and, him being in the suit that looks very similar and going on his own odyssey, touching the monolith that is the AI, the black suit and the whole just way they portray that scene. and it looks like he becomes the Star Child, after touching the screen, as it were. They're just, the whole thing is like, yeah, they put this into the film. And like I said, they give you the happy ending. Oh, they defeated the AI. But it's not about that. That's so you're disarmed. They always give you the happy ending so you swallow the poison pill, subconsciously speaking. But anyway, I think that's enough for this one. I'll leave it there. Later.